Thank you for yielding, but thank you even more for your leadership on this issue and God knows how many others. You're a force of nature, and happy to be with you on this day. I'm coming from Delaware, and we have about 1 million people who live in Delaware, and they're not shy about telling our congressional delegation, Senator Coons and Congresswoman Lisa Blunt-Rochester and me what they're thinking. And we go home just about every night, and so they get to tell us a lot of times in person. They also call our office. We have 3 offices in Delaware. They call our office here in Washington. They send us emails. We used to get a lot of letters, but now mostly receive emails, not too many letters. But I've never seen the kind of outcry, if you will, from the people of my state on any nomination. I've been privileged to serve here. This is my 17th year. So we've seen a lot of nominations come and go. We've seen a number of presidents come and go. But I've never seen anything quite like this. I'd asked my staff to compile for me through yesterday the number of folks who had either called us or emailed or sent us letters on the nomination of Betsy DeVos to be Secretary of Education. And as of yesterday, over 3,700 people had contacted my office, over 3,700. Now, that may not be a lot from Oklahoma. That may not be a lot from California. That's a lot in Delaware, 3,700. I asked my staff to break it, let us know if we'd heard from anybody outside of Delaware, and over 700. And then I said, for the folks who've contacted us from Delaware with respect to this nomination of Betsy DeVos, I said, how many were for her? Out of 3,700, over 3,700, 10. I've never seen anything like that. And so that means there are over 3,700 people who, in my state, raised their voice against her nomination. Now, just because the numbers are like 370 to 1 against the nomination, that doesn't necessarily mean I should oppose the nomination, but it certainly makes me stop and think if I had been inclined to do so. But Mr. President, I rise today not just as a United States senator, but as a recovering governor and a father, one who knows the value of public education, really from personal experience. My wife and I grew up, she in North Carolina, and I in West Virginia, a little bit in Ohio, and mostly Virginia. But we grew up in public schools. Our sons attended public schools throughout high school, graduated, and went off to college, and we're proud of what they've accomplished. They're 26 and 28 years old today. Very proud of what they have accomplished. I was stepson for my first marriage. He lives in Michigan, raised a family of 4 children, his wife, and very proud of what he accomplished. Again, a product of public schools. When I graduated from high school, I was fortunate to win a Navy ROTC scholarship, go off to Ohio State, worked a couple of jobs while I was going to school, and was able to become one of the first people in my family ever to go to college and to graduate from college. And spent 5 years as a naval flight officer during the Vietnam War, and at the end of the war, came back to the U.S. and moved to Delaware. And there, thanks to the GI Bill, and again, continue to fly as a reserve P-3 aircraft mission commander, was able to make ends meet and get a graduate degree in business administration from the University of Delaware. The 8 years I was governor from 93 to 2001, I spent a big part of those 8 years focusing on creating a more nurturing environment for job creation, job preservation. And our presiding officer has heard me wax on, and our committee, more often than he probably wants to remember, about a major job of government, I don't care if you're state, local, federal, is to create a nurturing environment for job creation, job preservation. If families, if you've got breadwinners, people who are earning an income, making a way for themselves, the rest in our job is actually a whole lot easier. And one of the keys to that nurturing environment is to make sure that the young men and women coming out of our colleges, our high schools, our trade schools, have the ability to read, to write, to think, to use the technology, and to have a good work ethic and go out and be a good employer for any employer who might hire them. Public education is personal for me, and I've had this remarkable connection to it for really my whole life. In our little state, I visit schools almost every week. We have a program called Principal for a Day, and I've been Principal for a Day. It's a State Chamber of Commerce program. I joke and tell people I've been Principal for a Day for about half the schools in Delaware. It's not quite right, but probably 30 or more, which is a lot. And I keep running into kids who tell me where they went to high school. I said, well, I was your principal. Did you know that? And I said, only for a day. But it was a good day. And I learned a lot from doing that. I've mentored for probably a couple of decades, and a bunch of different kids, and trying to help be a good role model for them and give them extra person to be able to lean on and to count on. And just recently, I was over at a school a couple of miles from our home called Mount Pleasant Elementary, which is it's a terrific elementary school in the Brandywine School District in northern Delaware. And the teacher of the year there, teacher of the year for the state, was good enough to let me come by and to shadow her for part of her day and see what a really terrific teacher does. During the 8 years I was governor, one of the highlights of my year, every year, was the day that I would host in June at the end of the school year. We have 19 school districts, each school district pick their teacher of the year, but to have the chance to have for lunch the Delaware Teachers of the Year, and just to focus in their school districts, in their schools, in their classes, what was working to raise student achievement, and really to be inspired by all of them. I hear regularly from my constituents about the importance of public education. In fact, I was out running late Sunday afternoon, actually, into dusk, and was driving by the Wawa on Philadelphia Pike and just north of Wilmington, and some guy came by and he rolled down his window, and as I ran along, and he said, "Don't vote for that Betsy DeVos." And I said, "Really? You can't get away from this." And but I hear it a lot, and I hear a message loud and clear. Many of our colleagues have covered this nomination at some length, but I think it bears repeating. And I would just say this: experience matters. Mrs. DeVos has, as far as I can tell, no experience in public education as a student, none as a parent, none as a teacher, none as a school administrator, and none. And maybe that alone should not disqualify her, but it's concerning. During her confirmation hearing, Ms. DeVos failed to answer the most basic questions relating to education policy. And she demonstrated, not just in my view, but certainly the views of a lot of the people who watched that, who shared their thoughts with me, that she was unqualified, really unprepared for what I think is a critical task. Many of my colleagues who support Ms. DeVos point to her experience in Michigan, but Ms. DeVos used her significant wealth and influence apparently to push an education reform agenda centered on vouchers, centered on for-profit charter schools that delivered questionable outcomes for students and taxpayers. Let me just say, I'm the governor who proposed legislation, signed legislation creating charter schools. I've been a champion of charter schools, public charter schools in my state and in our country. I've been a champion here in the Congress. I am not a champion of all the for-profit colleges and universities that we have. Some of them are very good, some of them are not. And I am concerned with the advent of for-profit charter schools, particularly those that aren't doing the job, getting the job done, and raising student achievement for the young men and women that are students there. Leading the Department of Education is a very big job. It is a very important job. The Secretary of Education is responsible for overseeing a budget of some $36 billion for K-12 education and $150 billion for higher education, as well as managing a portfolio of more than $1.2 trillion in outstanding federal student loans. I've been fortunate as a congressman, as a governor, as a senator, to work with any number of secretaries of education. In the administration of George Herbert Walker Bush, the administration of Bill Clinton, the administration of George W. Bush, and the administration of Barack Obama. Dick Riley, people like Dick Riley, former governor of South Carolina. People like Arne Duncan, who was just a great school leader in Illinois and for our country as well. And when I think of the giants that they were and the work that they did and how knowledgeable they were, how inspiring they were, how uplifting they were, that's the kind of leader that we need. And they weren't just all in Democratic administrations or Democrat and Republican administrations. And as much as ever, we need that kind of leader today. I just conclude, Mr. President, by saying that Ms. DeVos too often lacks experience. Just as often has the wrong experience that we should expect from someone to lead the Department of Education at what is really a critical junction for our country. I cannot support her nomination because I'm not convinced that she's interested in bringing Democrats and Republicans together on a shared vision of improving public education in this country. And reluctantly, I must urge my Democrat and Republican colleagues to listen to this groundswell of voices from across the country and ultimately oppose this nomination. Thank you very much.